Good morning and welcome to ANANDA Developments PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time by the Q&A tab situated in the right corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so. Before we begin, I'd like to submit the following poll. I'd now like to hand you over to Melissa Sturgis, CEO. Good morning.
Morning, Alessandro, and thank you, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to try and keep this to about 20 minutes so that we've got plenty of time for questions and get the whole thing sort of wrapped up inside 40 minutes so everyone can go about their day. So to kick off, we are ANANDA Developments, cannabinoid pharmaceuticals for chronic inflammatory pain conditions, and I'll talk a bit about that during the presentation. We're AQUIS quoted, and important to note that we are EIS and VCT approved. So that's a really nice tax effective investment for anyone who's interested. And we're members of the Quoted Companies Alliance, which, you know, there's a lot of talk about the AQUIS exchange, and we are adhering to the highest standards of corporate governance that are possible, as we would if we were on the main board or on AIM. So really, I think going back, we all thought that cannabis was a story all on its own, and what we've really realized over the last few years that actually it's a story about complex chronic inflammatory pain. So where cannabinoid medicines really help are in these areas where you have these chronic inflammatory pain conditions, things like the neuropathic pain conditions where you've got brain inflammation like epilepsy, fibromyalgia, and neuropathic pain from chemotherapy, and peripheral neuropathic pain as well, also from chemotherapy. So those sorts of indications, we know there's a lot of people unwell in society at the moment, and a lot of these diseases and conditions have an inflammatory base to them. We also know that opioids as the first line of defense are really not encouraged. And across the board, there really is a lack of effective, efficacious treatments. There's a lot of adverse side effects from the medicines that people are taking, and they are very, very costly. So in terms of the market size, you know, we're really looking at an opportunity in this anti-inflammatory drug market space, projected to be worth up to US $118 billion by 2027. And you can see there, I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but the UK, we have about 28 million chronic pain sufferers, so quite a large number. And the NHS is spending a lot of money trying to keep these people relatively healthy, manage their diseases and reduce the levels of pain, i.e. inflammation. And obviously down the line, you know, we would like to see ANANDA becoming a global business. So we've always got our eye on what's the larger opportunity here. And so you look to the US, where you've got about 50 million people suffering from chronic pain. So huge opportunity in this inflammatory chronic pain arena. ANANDA's addressing this opportunity in three ways. Firstly, we are developing NHS approved and MHRA licensed cannabinoid medicines, and that's through our subsidiary MRX Medical, and I'll talk about those initiatives shortly. We also have a project to cultivate medical cannabis flower for the inhalation and oil extraction market. That's very much in the unlicensed medicine space, and that's probably the area that most people associate with cannabinoid medicines to date. And we're also very focused on our genetics program, because that is the future, we believe, of medical cannabis flower cultivation globally. We're already seeing some moves in this direction towards seed production, away from clones, away from tissue culture, because they are very expensive and they have quite a few downsides. So they're really the three areas of our business. Starting first with MRX Medical. The point about MRX Medical is using the IP that we've developed, and we have 4 patent pending formulations. 3 have CBD only, 1 has CBD and THC in it, and we have a patent pending for the formulation methodology as well. So what we've done is worked out with our IP how to design and create a cannabinoid medicine that essentially meets the needs of the regulator. And that's a really important point, because what no one has cracked yet is how do you get these medicines into the wider community? And we believe it is by creating medicines that are standardized, that are verified, that have a lot of data attached to them, that can be used in clinical trials, that the NHS and NICE, the National Institute for Clinical and Healthcare Excellence, are happy to adopt into the public health system. So that's been a really strong focus of our work, and we're making really good strides in that area. We have 2 clinical trials that we've announced using our MRX1 formulation. We made an announcement this morning about having signed a drug supply agreement which covers how we put a legal framework around our ownership of that IP going forward, because that's really the key to making money out of this, obviously, as well as helping many, many patients. So I think I covered this really: 4 proprietary cannabinoid formulations, 5 patents pending, and it's about building a pipeline of these randomized controlled trials. Now, what we don't see ourselves as being is a fully blown research-driven company. We're very commercially minded, and so our model is we formulate and we create the IP around these medical cannabis formulations, these cannabinoid formulations, and then we partner with clinicians and investigators who have patients who want to use our formulation in their randomized controlled trials. So they're developing and writing the protocols, and they are getting the third-party funding. So the funding doesn't have to come from ANANDA and ANANDA shareholders. It comes from third parties. The trials are effectively run by a third party, by these clinician investigators, but most importantly, using our IP and our formulations. Our objective is that on these clinical trials being successful, that ultimately we can get the NHS to adopt our medicines for the particular indications that are being investigated in these clinical trials. And I'm sure everyone's aware that at the moment in the unlicensed cannabis medicine space, so all of the other oil extracts and flower, there's no link between the product and an indication or a condition or a disease. Because there has been no research done, there is no evidence that the regulator is happy with that allows the owner of that, or the seller of that flower or oil, to actually make any claims about it. So it means that it's very, very difficult in that space to differentiate your medicine. So we're all about getting these clinical trials going, getting differentiation in our medicines so that claims can be made against our formulations and they can get into the public health system and be funded by the NHS. So that's sort of, really the holy grail. So at the moment, we have chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy clinical trial confirmed, endometriosis confirmed, both phase 2, and we are targeting further clinical trials. Interestingly, now that the word is getting out that we have these 2 phase 2 RCTs happening, we're now being approached by clinician investigators and other parties who are interested in using our formulations, because up until now, no one has really come up with a formulation that can be put into an RCT. Apart from, obviously, GW Pharmaceuticals, they took 20 years and developed their own medicines, very much using their own balance sheet, their own financing, and they took those medicines through their own clinical trials. Our model is slightly different, to work with these third-party investigators. So that's what we look like in terms of clinical trial pipeline. Really exciting that we're able to move straight into phase 2 trials. So we're missing out all this preclinical work. We're missing out all the normal phase 1 work, because what we have formulated is considered to be safe and can go straight into patients and into large numbers of patients. The first trial, MRX1, is going into is CIPN, being run by Professor Mari Fallon up at Edinburgh University. A huge indication, lots of potential there for pain. The reason she approached us to use our formulations is that she has patients that were using over-the-counter CBD and finding it helpful, but they wanted a more robust medicine, and she wanted a medicine that she could prescribe as part of the overall care plan that she had for her patients. And so this is the way she can do that, is by using a medicine that is standardized, that is verified, that meets the regulator's requirements, use that in an RCT, get good results, and then she will then say to the regulator, I want to start prescribing this as a medicine for my NHS patients. The other trial, endometriosis, an absolutely standout candidate for a cannabinoid medicine, being funded by the Chief Scientist Office at NHS Scotland, showing that the approach we're taking does have the support of the regulator. If we can get the NHS to support, then we know we're on the right track. Endometriosis is all about inflammation and very much about pain. It's amazing how many people have come to us and started to talk to us about this condition now that they know we're doing the trial. Also very exciting, being run by, again, the University of Edinburgh, by Dr. Lucy Whitaker is leading the trial, and she is being supported by Professor Andrew Horn, Professor Philippa Saunders, and Professor Andrew Horn is the chairman of the World Endometriosis Congress. So we're talking about really pretty serious clinical investigators here, which is great for us to have the quality and caliber of those people. Moving across to our medical cannabis flower. So where we're at the moment, we have this incredible site. We've conducted 2 seasons of cultivation trials. We've had really very, very good results from our cultivation. We are now ready when we believe the market can take the flower that we will produce and that we can see the margins. So yes, the market is growing. Yes, we're seeing local producers, we're seeing offshore producers. What we're not seeing, so we're seeing revenues increase, but what we're not seeing is the margins being robust enough. And I think everyone who watches the space sees that there's an incredible amount of consolidation. There's a lot of places shutting down their cultivation. So we're seeing consolidation in the sector. We want to make sure that we can really see margins. So it's all well and good to say size, scale, revenue, but at the end of the day, you need to make money from that. So we're just pausing that while we assess what is going on. We signed this MOU with Nottingham Trent University, and the first part of that is to create this bigger story about sustainability. We've not talked a huge amount about sustainability because we don't want to greenwash. We don't want to make all sorts of claims about carbon zero and carbon negative. What we want to do is make sure we've got a really robust story. And with Nottingham Trent's expertise in sustainability and their expertise in agriculture, we believe we can partner with them and really package this story in a way that can attract non-dilutive third-party funding to really build a very robust case, which I think will be unique, certainly in the UK, and I think we're going to put together a globally unique proposition. So that's very exciting going forward as well. This, if I press, it hasn't worked. If you go online and look at this video, this shows our 2023 cultivation. So you can see that the quality of the flower we produced is really high. The quality of the plants, they're actually, really beautiful plants. Our strain development. So again, I'm going to jump to this first point that Organogram put $8 million into a company called Phylos Bioscience, and Phylos is creating stable genetics in seed format in the US. Organogram has said that it is going to move 50% of its cultivation from clones across to seeds in the near term. So that's a really important first sign that we're seeing this move from clones across to seeds. Seeds being the way that genetic material should really be stored going forward for cultivation and for strain stabilization and to develop these unique cultivars that we know we're going to need. So there's 2 aspects to it. One is the cost saving. The other is being able to breed these specific cultivars that we know we're going to need going forward. Not only will we need them, but other companies will need them. So this is potentially a really interesting standalone business. We're into the 3rd generation at the moment. What we need to do is get to the 6th generation and then start crossing some of these genetics with each other to work out where we can go with these specific IP cultivars that we want to breed. Again, with Nottingham Trent University as our partners, we believe we can consolidate that work, reduce the cost of it significantly, but still progress on the timelines we've set ourselves to get that through to generation 6 and start doing some really interesting crossing. This is a really good image. It shows you the difference you get on the left-hand side there, bottom left, there plants grown from seed. Right-hand side, exactly the same cultivar, exactly the same age, got grown from a clone. So sort of the evidence speaks for itself that you really get a very, very superior, high-quality plant. Doing it, sort of the standard way that every crop in the world is cultivated, by seed. It makes sense. And actually, I might just quickly go back there. The reason we believe we haven't seen this move to seed is because many companies have been in a real hurry to get to market, so they've stuck with what is being done, which is clones. And the history of cannabis cultivation has mainly been illicit, and so it's happened in attics and basements. And so the sort of basic genetic work that is done in every other crop just hasn't yet been done in cannabis, and we see an incredible opportunity to do that. And as I said, we're halfway through that program. So the competitive landscape is sort of interesting. Do we compare ourselves with other cannabis companies? Do we compare ourselves with other drug development companies? So what we've done here is really pick out a few key points about where competition comes from and what the landscape looks like, sort of a little bit more generally. It speaks for itself, but we know that if you develop drugs in this space, proper drugs that have evidence and that you can make claims against, the prize can be quite big, GW Pharmaceuticals. We know that opiates are no longer the first line of medication for many conditions that the NHS is supporting. So again, we're not really competing with other medicines. So we're not saying MRX1 or MRX4 or 3 is going to replace another medicine. It's going to be better for treating something. We're actually attacking indications and conditions where actually at the moment there is nothing that really works. We have found a way to remove THC from our formulations, which has really been one of the keys to getting these first 2 clinical trials. We know that there are many specialists who really still don't like THC. So being able to remove THC has, we believe, removed one of the main barriers to prescribing on the NHS. Not to say that THC doesn't have a place, but we want to get through that door of the NHS, and we believe that that's the way to do it. And we think that getting the funding for these first 2 clinical trials from non-dilutive sources, it sort of shows that we're on the right track there. As you know, the last formulation, or the most recent formulation that we've just applied for a patent against, that does have THC in it. So we certainly see THC as being part of the clinical trial landscape for us going forward. And then on the cultivation side, I talked about this, but low cost, carbon friendly, I think that's going to be really key. We know that DEFRA, the Department of Food, the Agriculture Department, there's money there for sustainability programs. We know in the pharmaceutical space, there is funding for sustainability type pharmaceutical ideas. So I think this is a really interesting world-leading idea that we're pulling together with Nottingham Trent University. And I'm pretty confident, unless someone can show me someone else who's really making a proper move from clones to seeds, I think we're leading the way there, and we have all the data. So everything that we have done to every one of our plants, we've tracked. The board, I won't labour this too much. It's been the same board since we listed the company. Professor Clive Page joined us recently, chair of the British Pharmacological Society. So that's a really important for us to have someone that's constantly in our ear saying, okay, make sure you do this the right way, make sure you do this way. What we're trying to do is actually build a pharmaceutical, a robust business here. Everyone else, I think I can talk to anyone if anyone would like more information about our directors. Shareholders, mainly the founders, as everyone knows, Charlie, the chairman, myself, Jeremy Clive, so a group of founding shareholders. And then we have also Tim Fry and Frank Mayo, who joined our register in sort of the last capital raising. So they've been very, very supportive. And we also have a fairly large group of followers who own quite a bit of stock as well, but quite a tightly held stock. And one of my mentors always said to me, don't worry about liquidity. It will take care of itself as your company grows. So we certainly intend to get liquidity. We intend to grow. So in terms of news flow, more clinical trials, progress on the trials, as we made an announcement this morning on progress on trials, commercial cultivation, maybe seeing some partnership agreement, wholesale fat flour cultivation agreement, certainly more news on Nottingham Trent partnership, news on the breeding program as we get that going again, and ultimately, working towards registering proprietary strains and the potential to establish this cannabinoid centre of excellence with our partners at Nottingham Trent University. I think that's something that the UK, I think the market here is mature enough that we can really look at that, and that would give us an incredible opportunity to continue to build what we're doing and certainly build the commercial aspects of what we're doing. So we will be presenting, we did present yesterday at the Investable Showcase. That was our first time at a healthcare conference, and it was really good. We had 5 very good meetings and presented. It was an excellent day and really interesting group of presenters and attendees. We'll also be at the 28th of November at the London Aquis Showcase Day. So, disclaimer, of course, and back to the beginning. So, Alessandro, I think that's it for the moment.
Yeah, perfect. Melissa, thank you very much for your presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab, which is situated on the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Melissa takes a few moments to review those questions that have been submitted today, I'd like to remind you the recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Melissa, as you know, we received a number of pre-submitted questions ahead of today's event. So if I could just ask you to start with those and give responses where it's appropriate to do so, I'll pick up from you at the end.
Thank you very much. So I have pre-submitted questions, and someone sent me a question from one of the online chat rooms, so I'll deal with that as well. I'll read the questions and then answer. A couple of them are really long, so I might break them up a little bit. So are you in discussion with Hilltop Leaf to potentially commission medical cannabis production? Always in discussion with Hamish. He's a good mate. At the moment, no particular plans to do that. We speak on a very regular basis to the other key players in the industry, and we all ultimately believe that there's a role for all of us to play and that this sector will be big enough to support all of us. So we do continue to speak, but we don't have any particular plans with Hilltop Leaf at the moment. Recent news media from various sources, including the BBC, indicate relations between Hilltop Leaf and Nottingham Trent, as well as ANANDA and NTU. A PE company's been mentioned. No, not really. Again, Hamish and I chatted the other day about Nottingham Trent. They've also been using Nottingham Trent for a little bit of advisory work and helping them on licensing, but there's no formal crossover at this point. Not to say they can't be going forward, but nothing formal that I can really give you an update on at this point. Is ANANDA's primary target market going forward to be uniquely Scottish? And if that's the case, what's holding us back in the rest of the UK? Absolutely not. That was it was just fortune took us to that part of the world. It actually, the relationship with Edinburgh University actually started way back in 2018 when we were putting together our initial submission for the Home Office for our research license in Lincolnshire, and we wanted to have a clinician investigator sort of on our team who was interested in clinical trials, because that was part of getting the Home Office and the regulator to understand and approve our research license to do all that growing at scale that you've seen on the video, or on the picture that I put on this presentation. And we were introduced to Professor Mari Fallon. So she sort of put her hand up and said, yep, I'm very interested in the space. She had, I think, done some work on some GW formulations quite a long time ago. So she was open to the idea of cannabinoid medicines. And so that relationship started back in 2018. And then when she decided she wanted to do this trial on CIPN, she approached us and asked for the formulation. And then what happened was the endometriosis team at Edinburgh University found out that Mari had managed to get this formulation. And so they also approached us. So it's very interesting to us that we're now being approached to use our formulation, which shows that there's really an opportunity. What's holding us back in the rest of the UK? Absolutely nothing. We are working on lots of initiatives, and we will bring new news as we identify more clinical trials. How confident, so going on to the next question, how confident are you that in partnership with Nottingham Trent University that grant funding will be secured? Very confident. Is the intention to secure sufficient grant funding to recommence the genetics program in time for the 2024 growing season? We don't actually need to time it for the 2024 season necessarily, because the actual genetics program does happen indoors. So we don't need our cultivation facility, we don't need the tunnels to do the genetic stabilization. We can do that indoors. All I can really say about that is, obviously we will move as quickly as we possibly can. In terms of a timeline, I don't want to commit to something because I can't commit to something because I don't know. But obviously our intention is, speed is of the essence, of course. Getting it right is of the essence, of course. So we will move as quickly as we can. If grant funding cannot be secured, will the genetics program be abandoned, or will other funding options be considered? We have no intention of abandoning this program. We all think that it has huge value because no one else is really doing it. And I have to say, what we've really taken is a lot of our metals and mining expertise about databases. So I know historically that if I have a project in Africa and BHP Billiton want to farm into that project or put money into it, the first thing they want to do is look at my data room. What we know in genetics so far in medical cannabis is most people who have what they say is a unique strain will want to sell it to you for a lot of money and a royalty, but they actually can't show you exactly how that strain was developed. They do not have the history, the data history in a database that could be verified by a Monsanto or a Syngenta. So what we are doing is we are using a very sophisticated plant breeding software to track every single action that we make to these plants, so that as we build this database and as we progress this breeding, if we can get the attention of one of these big, large seed companies, for example, or another cannabis cultivator, probably from Europe or North America, that's where I think they would probably come from, they will actually be able to have a look at the data. We will be able to show them a database. And that's where the value is. The value is in the data. So we're not going, it will not be, not any time will we consider to abandon that. In the RNS announcing the MOU with NTU, we said we'll combine our expertise to pursue grant funding. Are you saying it's the intention to secure grants to fund the building of the GMP facility to enable the commercial cultivation to commence following the completion of the genetics program? No, I think I covered some of this in the presentation. So what we really want to do is create this a bigger sustainability story, but a robust sustainability story that shows that from cultivation through to medicine, we can be carbon zero or better. So we call it a closed loop system. We call it a circular economy. It's something that Stuart Pickover, one of our directors and who does cultivation for a living, he's very focused on this as well. So we believe that that's actually the answer, or that's the solution to the problem of cost, but it's also a way to get some really interesting grant funding into this business. So the genetic stabilization and that cultivation and medicine manufacture programs can run in parallel. One is not dependent on the other. Ultimately, of course, we would love to be growing we want to grow and we would love to grow from our own sable seeds, but they don't require each other, and one doesn't have to come before the other. The RCTs for endo and CIPN have approximately 100 patients. Is that number of patients large enough to sufficiently demonstrate the efficacy of MRX, or will further larger trials be required? That's a really good question. Probably more one for, the regulator and for the data when we see it. The fact that they are phase 2 RCTs means that there is comfort that these drugs are going to be safe to be used in humans. So that's really important. Secondly, 100 patients, not insignificant. If we don't get lots of dropouts, I suppose, if we get really good results, if the results are really clear and robust, then our confidence level would increase about a shorter time frame to getting those drugs prescribable on, for example, the NHS. So I can't really answer the question, but I hope that adds a bit of colour. Other RCTs planned? Absolutely. What timescales? As soon as possible. We at the moment, so I'm not going to specifically talk. Oh, well, I suppose I can. So fibromyalgia, we're really interested in that because it's a large unmet need, a lot of people suffering, and we know that there's a lot of inflammation, and it's chronic inflammation and pain. So that's a big one that we're really focused on. We've got some other indications, but very much it's about, we're actually sort of doing this matchmaking at the moment where we're being approached by clinicians who are saying, we're interested in using your formulation. We're also reaching out to various parties. So it's sort of a little bit of us pursuing and also being approached. So I hope that helps answer that. Timescales, again, pretty much just as quickly as we can, because we don't have to have the balance sheet ourselves to run these trials. We can roll them out fairly quickly. So, and that's what we want to do. We want to be getting evidence in lots of different conditions so that the NHS will take notice and say, yep, we're happy for these medicines to be prescribed. Will they be funded in a similar way to endo and CIPN? Yes, that's very much our intention. It is not our intention to need, the 20 million and whatever it takes to do these trials in-house. Next question, do we know when shareholders can start to see some value creation here? We have been waiting patiently in the wilderness for 3 years, and all positive news appears to either make no impact or it sinks the share price ever lower. It is very disheartening. Yes, the markets are really tough. What we are doing is trying to keep our costs really low, trying to keep lots of movement on all three fronts in our business, doing it in a cost-effective and a very focused way, sticking to our plan, trying to do all those good things. We really believe that these medicines are here and here to stay. And so we all have to be patient, unfortunately. But markets are tough. Yeah, I don't know that I can say much more about that. Any update on the move over to AIM from Aquis? No update on that. It is as everyone knows, it's a very expensive program. And I must say, I've been really impressed by the team at Aquis recently. They're trying really hard. Everyone should have noticed that on the LSE chat, we now have live RNSs. And we are getting to the point now where on the Apple iPhone stock feed, which I think comes from a Yahoo feed, which I think comes from Morningstar, they've now got our market cap there. So we're the first Aquis company that has its market cap on that feed. It's still wrong, but at least they're starting to pull the data through. So we are working really, really hard with AQUIS, and I have to thank Sarah Louise Porter, particularly, who stays on the case for us, really pushing very hard to get these data feeds through so that shareholders can see what we're doing, can see our market cap, can see our share price, can see our news flow, and can trade our stock. So that's the objective. Next question. This one has been sent to me from one of the chat rooms. I asked a question about organising lobbying to open up the NHS prescribing. That's also a really good question. So our view is that lobbying isn't going to solve the problem. Evidence is. So the NHS has very clearly said a couple of things. We're going to make medical cannabis legal. They did that in 2018. In 2019, NICE wrote a very large report on the evidence for medical cannabis in the UK, and they asked for more research. And we are doing that research. And as you know, we're getting support from the NHS up in Scotland at the moment to do this work. So our view is that lobbying isn't what is going to get the NHS across the line. What is going to get the NHS across the line is evidence so that they can open the door to large-scale prescribing. That's my answer to that. Right. Yes. So I've got a question online. How to make your product stand out versus the competition, as it's a busy space with some of the products that are not perhaps as effective or muddy the waters in perception. That is the key point to the business plan. Certainly from the evidence side, if we have evidence, then there are claims against our medicine. They then are able to be prescribed widely for a particular indication. They have IP around them, and doctors will have confidence that they are formulated, manufactured to a standard that they would expect when they're prescribing any other medicine. So building the moat of differentiation with this evidence is absolutely a key to it. Now, in terms of, if you look at the unlicensed space, so in terms of our flour and maybe oil extracts, yes, you're absolutely right. So we see lots of products on the market. The only way they are differentiated at the moment for the patient and the clinician is by THC CBD ratio. And that means that the competition becomes around price and it becomes around margin. So the answer to that is, again, lending from the metals and mining space, be a bottom decile cost producer so that ultimately you will always have a business that is sustainable because you will be a very low cost producer. And secondly, it's getting these genetics right, doing the stabilization work so that we actually have properly unique cultivars, and then look to do some RCTs and some controlled, some clinical trials with those as well. What I should point out that MRX formulations, they do not require us to start growing up in Lincolnshire or complete our genetic stabilization. So at the moment, we're formulating these medicines by buying in the pharmaceutical ingredients and formulating them with our contract manufacturing organization. So we're basically using an outsourced pharmaceutical manufacturing facility, as many other drug companies do, buying in the third-party ingredients. So that is a completely legitimate way to build a cannabinoid medicine, and that's what we've done. So we don't rely on our own cultivation or our own extraction in the meantime. Down the line, of course, providing our own ingredients into our medicines would be amazing, but we don't need that to happen as we're developing MRX medicines. Are there plans for international expansion, and are there any areas or opportunities where you would look to make acquisitions? Expansion, look, we've always got our minds on what's going on internationally. We talk to people internationally. So yes, of course, we think that getting this foothold with the NHS, I mean, we've got, nearly 80 million people in this country, so lots and lots of patients here. The minute you start to look at other jurisdictions, you add incredible complexity and cost from a regulatory and a legal perspective. So we've always got our eyes on it. We're always talking. We speak to people in the US regularly. We speak to people in Europe regularly. So we've got our eyes on it, but no particular plans at the moment. ultimately, we would like this to be a global business, of course. And any acquisitions? No acquisitions in the pipeline at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Melissa. I think you've addressed all those questions that you can from investors. And of course, the company will review all the questions submitted today and will publish those responses out on the Investor Meet Company platform. But just before redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which is particularly important to yourself and the company, Melissa, could I just ask you for a few closing comments?
Thank you very much for the support of many of our shareholders, because we do have a lot of people following what we're doing, and we will continue. And we really believe we have a very a winning proposition in this space, especially in this sort of disease management, complex chronic pain space. And we will continue working apace. And I'm always open to questions, comments, and you will see a lot more of us coming up. We're going to use this platform quite a lot, and now speaking at a number of conferences over the next few months. Thanks, Alessandro.
Perfect. Melissa, thank you for updating investors today. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of ANANDA Developments PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation, and good morning to you all.